I never thought something like this could happen to me. My name is Jake, and I was married to my high school sweetheart, Sarah, for 8 years. At first glance, we seemed like the perfect couple, youthful, in love, and ambitious. We built a life together, complete with our cozy house in the suburbs and two golden retrievers, Max and Bella. But as anyone knows, appearances can be deceiving. Lately, things had felt off. There were subtle changes in Sarah's behavior that I couldn't ignore. She started working late more often, claiming she had a big project at her job as a marketing executive. I thought nothing of it. After all, it was a competitive field, and I wanted to support her ambitions. But then I noticed small things. She started dressing more provocatively, wearing clothes I had never seen before, and she would often dismiss my attempts to connect, like when I wanted to spend time together on weekends. One Friday evening, I returned home early from work, eager to surprise her with dinner. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed her car was already parked outside, which was peculiar but not alarming. I opened the front door, calling her name, but there was no response. When I walked into the living room, I was greeted by the sound of someone rustling in the bedroom. My heart raced as I approached the door. It was partially ajar, and I hesitated for a moment, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. I pushed it open. What I saw shook me to my core. Sarah was in bed with none other than Ryan, my childhood enemy. The guy had always been a thorn in my side, the popular jock who'd bullied me through school and had a knack for stealing the spotlight. They were tangled in each other, laughing and whispering in a way that made my blood boil. I stumbled back, struggling to comprehend the betrayal unfolding before my eyes. I felt rage and heartbreak collide within me. I turned on my heel and stormed out of the house, slamming the front door behind me. I climbed into my car and drove aimlessly for a while, the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I couldn't wrap my head around what had just happened. In my mind, I replayed the signs I had dismissed, every late night, every new outfit. I thought I had been a supportive husband, but here I was, blindsided by the woman I loved more than anything. After a couple of hours of driving, I found myself in a parking lot overlooking the city skyline. I sat there, staring at the lights twinkling in the distance, trying to make sense of my emotions. I felt humiliated, furious, and yet underneath it all, I was still in love with Sarah. How could she do this to me, to us? I was crushed. Eventually, I knew I had to confront her. I drove back home, my heart pounding in my chest. I took a deep breath and walked through the door, preparing for the storm that was about to unleash. Sarah was still in bed, but now she was alone, looking disheveled and confused. "Jake," she exclaimed, her voice a mix of surprise and guilt. "You're home early." "Yeah," I replied, my voice flat. "I saw you." The color drained from her face as she realized the weight of my words. In that moment, I could see the panic in her eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off. "Don't give me your excuses, Sarah. I saw you with him. You think I'm going to let you spin this into something it's not." She started to stammer, trying to explain herself, but I wasn't interested in her lies. "You're a cheat, Sarah. You've been lying to me for months." Her demeanor shifted and she became defensive. "Jake, please, it's not what you think. Ryan means nothing to me. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness." I took a step back, my heart aching for the woman I thought I knew. A moment of weakness. You don't just accidentally end up in bed with someone. This is deliberate. The confrontation spiraled from there. She tried to downplay everything, insisting it was a fling, that she still loved me, but her words felt hollow. Each excuse only fueled my anger, and as the conversation heated, I realized I was in a battle, one I never wanted to fight but felt compelled to win. As I walked away from her, I felt a sense of resolve wash over me. I had loved Sarah through thick and thin, but this betrayal was a line I couldn't ignore. I knew I had to come up with a plan, one that would not only allow me to reclaim my dignity but also ensure that Ryan, the man who had taken advantage of my trust, faced the consequences of his actions. What would that plan look like? How would I ensure that he wouldn't just get away with this? I had some ideas brewing in my mind, and as painful as it was, I felt a flicker of satisfaction at the thought of revenge. This was just the beginning of a dark path, and I was ready to take the first step. If you'd like to continue, just let me know. The days following the confrontation were a whirlwind of emotions. I was angry, confused, and heartbroken, but also motivated. I spent more time at work, burying myself in projects and avoiding Sarah as much as possible. I needed space to think, to plot, and to find a way to make Ryan feel the sting of betrayal that I was experiencing. My anger fueled me, and I started to research Ryan's life. I had always known he was a successful entrepreneur, running a small but thriving tech company. I reached out to old classmates and friends from high school, asking them about his current projects and any weaknesses he might have. I was surprised at how willing people were to talk about him, perhaps because they knew the kind of person he was, selfish and arrogant, always bragging about his achievements. After a few days of digging, I learned that Ryan was launching a new app aimed at streamlining communication for small businesses. It was ambitious, but I discovered from a mutual acquaintance that it was riddled with issues. The app had been plagued by technical glitches, and there were rumors that investors were growing increasingly skeptical. This was my opportunity. I formulated a plan. If I could somehow sabotage his launch, it would not only embarrass him but also impact his reputation and his business. I knew it was a slippery slope, but I felt justified. He had crossed a line that I couldn't overlook, and I was determined to ensure that he would face repercussions for his actions. To execute my plan, I started by creating a fake identity online. I set up a profile on a tech forum where developers would gather to discuss their projects. I carefully crafted my persona as an eager young programmer, looking for advice. I joined discussions about Ryan's app, planting seeds of doubt about its reliability. I pointed out potential flaws and encouraged others to do the same. It felt good to watch the responses roll in, with people questioning the app's viability and sharing their own concerns about working with Ryan. Next, I reached out to a few tech bloggers, posing as a whistleblower who had insider information about the app. I carefully leaked information about the glitches and instability, making it sound urgent and credible. Within a week, articles began popping up, casting a shadow over Ryan's launch. It was exhilarating to see my plan in action, and I felt a dark satisfaction each time I saw a new post questioning his integrity. Meanwhile, Sarah was still trying to salvage our relationship. She would send me messages pleading for forgiveness, promising that it would never happen again. But I was already too far gone. I had a new focus, a new goal, and I felt empowered by it. I often found myself reflecting on her lies and deceit, and a part of me felt stronger knowing that I was taking control of the situation, even if it was through revenge. The day of Ryan's app launch arrived, and I could hardly contain my excitement. I watched as he proudly announced it on social media, but I also knew that I had set the stage for what was to come. The launch event took place at a local tech hub, and I made sure to be there, disguised, of course. I told myself it was just to see the fallout, but in reality, I was a part of something much bigger. As Ryan took the stage, I felt a swell of anticipation. The crowd was buzzing, but I noticed a few skeptical faces among the audience. It was clear that whispers of the app's problems had begun to circulate. When he started his presentation, I watched him speak with the same arrogant confidence that had always irked me. I could see it in his body language, the way he tried to brush off questions and concerns with vague assurances that everything was under control. But then it happened. As he demonstrated the app's features live, it crashed. The screen went black and the audience gasped. Ryan fumbled with his laptop, trying to recover, but it was obvious that he was flustered. I felt a rush of adrenaline as the crowd began to murmur and some even laughed. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the culmination of my plan to ensure he tasted failure. In the chaos that ensued, I slipped out of the venue, my heart racing with exhilaration. I knew I had played a part in this disaster, and while I felt a twinge of guilt for what I had done, it was quickly overshadowed by the thrill of revenge. I had turned the tables, and in that moment, I felt like I had regained my power. Eventually, news spread about the launch fiasco, and Ryan's reputation took a hit. Reports surfaced about the app's issues, and investors began to pull back. I felt a sense of victory each time I saw another article questioning his capabilities. It was as though I could finally breathe again, the weight of betrayal lifting as I focused on my mission. But as the weeks rolled on and Sarah continued to reach out, I realized that I was becoming consumed by my need for revenge. I had wanted to hurt Ryan, but in the process, I was hurting myself. I started to see how far I had strayed from who I used to be. Instead of finding closure, I was spiraling deeper into bitterness, and I knew I had to make a choice. I had to decide how far I was willing to go and what kind of person I wanted to be in the aftermath of all this chaos. While revenge had been intoxicating, I needed to consider the consequences of my actions, not just for Ryan, but for my own life and for Sarah as well. Let me know if you want to continue with the next part. With every passing day, the thrill of revenge began to fade, and I found myself facing the reality of my own choices. I had targeted Ryan with a calculated plan, watching his downfall unfold with a sense of satisfaction. But as I sat in my living room one evening, the weight of my actions pressed down on me. I could still hear Sarah's voice in my head, her pleas for forgiveness echoing in the silence. I had always believed that revenge would fill the void left by betrayal, but now it felt like I was only digging myself deeper into a hole of anger and resentment. I was tired of being consumed by hatred, and I realized I needed to confront the situation head-on, not just for Sarah, but for my own peace of mind. It was time to have a thorough conversation with her. I texted Sarah to meet me at a local coffee shop, a neutral ground where we could talk without the weight of our home's memories hanging over us. As I arrived first, I felt the familiar rush of anxiety. I hadn't seen her in weeks, aside from the occasional text. The woman who had once been my partner now felt like a stranger, and I wasn't sure what to expect. When Sarah arrived, her expression was a mix of nervousness and hope. She had put on a brave face, wearing a simple sundress with her hair down, but I could see the sadness in her eyes. We exchanged awkward pleasantries, and I felt a pang of nostalgia for the times we'd shared. But I quickly pushed those thoughts aside. I needed to stay focused. "Jake, I've missed you so much," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I know I messed up. I just want a chance to explain everything." I held up a hand to stop her. "Sarah, I don't want to hear more excuses. What happened between you and Ryan was unforgivable. You betrayed my trust in the worst way possible." I paused, feeling a mix of anger and pain. "But I also need to be honest with you. I've been consumed by my own feelings of revenge. I wanted to hurt him for what he did to us, but now I realize I've been hurting myself even more." Her eyes widened and I could see the realization hit her. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. "I've been trying to sabotage Ryan's career, and while it felt good for a moment, it's left me feeling hollow. I don't want to be that person anymore. I want to be better than this situation." She took a deep breath, her expression shifting to one of vulnerability. "I know I hurt you, and I can't begin to apologize enough for what I did. But I want to work on us, Jake. I want to change. I know I can't take back what happened, but I love you, and I'm willing to fight for our marriage." Her words struck a chord in me, and I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe there was a chance for us after all, but could I truly forgive her? Could I see past the betrayal and rebuild our relationship? I wasn't sure, but I knew I had to at least explore the possibility. "Let's take it slow," I said cautiously. "I don't want to rush back into anything, but I'm open to talking and figuring things out. But you have to commit to being honest with me, no more lies." "Absolutely," she agreed earnestly. "I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust back, I promise." As we sat across from each other, I could see the genuine remorse in her eyes. It was the first step in a long road ahead, but I felt a sense of relief wash over me. We talked for hours, discussing our feelings, our past, and what we wanted for the future. It was a raw, emotional conversation, and though it was difficult, I felt like we were finally making some progress. After that day, we started to rebuild our relationship, one conversation at a time. Sarah was committed to changing, and I tried to be open and honest about my feelings. We attended couples therapy, which was both enlightening and painful, forcing us to confront our issues head-on. But as our relationship began to mend, I found myself wrestling with the aftermath of my own actions. I had let my need for revenge dictate my behavior, and now I had to face the consequences of those choices. I decided it was time to reach out to Ryan directly, to explain that while I had wanted to hurt him, I didn't want to let my anger control my life any longer. I found his contact information through a mutual acquaintance and sent him a message asking to meet. I wasn't sure how he would respond, but I felt it was necessary to confront him in person. It was time to put the past behind me, both for my own sake and for Sarah's. When Ryan agreed to meet, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. I wanted to tell him that I was done playing games, that I had let my anger consume me, and that I wanted to move on. But I also wanted him to understand the damage he had caused, not only to me but to Sarah and ultimately to himself. As I approached the coffee shop where we agreed to meet, I took a deep breath. This was it. I was ready to clear the air and take control of my life once more. No more revenge, no more bitterness, just the chance to finally let go. Let me know if you want to continue with the next part. As I walked into the coffee shop, I scanned the room for Ryan. My heart raced at the thought of confronting the man who had shattered my world. I spotted him sitting at a table in the corner, a tall figure with a confident posture that had always annoyed me. Even after everything that had happened, he exuded an air of arrogance, scrolling through his phone like he owned the place. I took a deep breath to steady myself and approached the table. "Ryan," I said, trying to keep my voice even despite the storm of emotions brewing inside me. He looked up and for a brief moment surprise flickered across his face. "Jake," he replied, his tone casual as if we were just two old friends catching up. "What's this about?" I sat down across from him, trying to maintain my composure. "I wanted to talk about what happened between you and Sarah." He smirked slightly, leaning back in his chair with a cockiness that made my blood boil. "Yeah, I figured you would. I didn't think you'd take it this seriously, though." I clenched my fists, feeling the anger boiling up again. "This isn't a joke, Ryan. You hurt me. You hurt Sarah, too. It's not just about your little fling, it's about the trust that was broken." For a moment I saw a flicker of defensiveness in his eyes, but he quickly masked it with indifference. "Look, I didn't force her to do anything. She's an adult who made her own choices. If you want to blame someone, blame her." His words cut deeper than I expected, and I had to remind myself to stay calm. "I'm not here to argue about blame. I just needed to tell you that I've been consumed with anger and revenge because of you. I've done some things I'm not proud of." His brow raised, intrigued. "Oh, like what?" "I spread rumors about your app," I admitted, feeling a weight lift off my chest as I finally confessed. "I wanted to see you fail because of what you did to my life, but now I'm done with that. I don't want to be that person anymore." Ryan leaned in, a hint of disbelief in his eyes. "Really? You think that confessing this will make you feel better? You think it changes anything?" I met his gaze, my conviction growing stronger. "It changes everything for me. I don't want to be bitter or vengeful anymore. I want to rebuild my life and my marriage, but I also want you to understand that your actions have consequences. You can't just play with people's lives and expect everything to fall back into place." He chuckled, a dismissive sound that only fueled my frustration. "And what do you think is going to happen now? You think I'm going to apologize? You think I'll stop chasing what I want because you've had a moment of clarity?" "No," I shot back, my voice sharper than I intended. "I don't expect you to change overnight, but you should. Realize that your arrogance makes it easier for people to take you down. Maybe it's time you reassess how you treat others." He shrugged nonchalantly, but I could see a flicker of something in his eyes, maybe doubt, maybe realization. "You think you're so much better than me now, huh? Just because you're trying to be the bigger person." "I don't think I'm better than you, Ryan," I replied, my voice steadier. "I'm just trying to be better than who I was, and I'm giving you the chance to do the same." The moment hung heavy between us. I knew I wasn't going to change Ryan, but I needed him to know that he could no longer control my life. I had spent too long allowing his actions to shape my reality, and it was time for me to take back that power. "Maybe you should think about what you really want out of life," I said, rising from my seat. "Because right now, it seems like you're standing on a shaky foundation. I hope you figure it out before it all comes crashing down." As I turned to leave, I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. I had confronted Ryan, and even if it hadn't gone the way I imagined, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was a small step toward reclaiming my life, and I was ready to focus on what truly mattered, healing my relationship with Sarah. The following weeks brought a mix of challenges and breakthroughs. Sarah and I continued our therapy sessions, exploring the reasons behind her infidelity and my need for revenge. We had difficult conversations and faced uncomfortable truths about our relationship. It wasn't easy, but I felt hope for the first time in a long while. One evening, as we sat on the couch together, I turned to her with a vulnerable heart. "I want to try to build back what we lost, but I need you to be completely honest with me from now on." She nodded, genuine tears welling in her eyes. "I promise, Jake. I've learned so much through this process, and I see how my actions hurt us both. I want to make it right, and I'm willing to do the work." We started going on date nights again, slowly rekindling the romance that had been lost. The process was slow, but we both recognized that rebuilding trust was a journey, not a destination. I began to feel more like myself again, shedding the weight of revenge and embracing the possibility of a hopeful future. But as we moved forward, I couldn't shake the feeling that Ryan was still lurking in the shadows. I had seen how quickly he could manipulate situations to his advantage, and I wondered if he would retaliate or try to regain control over my life in some way. I wasn't going to let that happen. I had taken my power back once, and I would do it again if necessary. I was no longer the victim. I was reclaiming my narrative, and I was determined to write a new chapter for myself and for Sarah. Let me know if you want to continue with the next part. As Sarah and I continued to rebuild our relationship, I thought we had reached a turning point. We were making progress, but I still felt a nagging unease regarding Ryan. My instincts told me that he wouldn't just let things lie. After all, I had publicly embarrassed him, or at least I thought I had. He didn't strike me as someone who could accept defeat gracefully. One night, while Sarah was at a book club meeting, I decided to do some digging about Ryan's recent endeavors. I wanted to keep tabs on him, just in case. My search led me deep into the rabbit hole of social media and news articles. I discovered that Ryan had recently pivoted his focus to another project, a new startup aimed at developing a tech platform for freelancers. As I read about it, something inside me snapped, fueling my protective instincts. I didn't want him to gain momentum or recognition, especially after everything that had happened. But there was also a more complex feeling brewing. Was I jealous? That night, I spent hours online, digging into the details of his new venture. I found out he was trying to raise significant funding and had already secured a meeting with some reputable investors. My heart raced as I thought about the power I felt when I pulled the rug out from under his app launch. It was in that moment that I realized I could do it again. I could infiltrate this new project just like I had done previously. But this time, it would be different. This time, I wouldn't just sabotage him. I would make it a lesson, a message that he could not play with other people's lives without consequences. The following day, I crafted a new online persona, this time as a tech-savvy freelancer interested in collaborating on his project. I reached out to Ryan through a fake email, expressing my admiration for his work and suggesting that we connect over coffee to discuss potential collaboration. I wasn't sure if he would bite, but I needed to play the game. To my surprise, within a few hours, I received a response. Ryan was enthusiastic and eager to meet, clearly flattered by the attention. I felt a mix of exhilaration and nervousness at the prospect of seeing him again, knowing that I had a plan to execute. We arranged to meet at a trendy cafe downtown. As I prepared for our meeting, I reminded myself of my purpose. I was there not just to sabotage his project, but to reclaim the power he had taken from me. I put on a confident facade, donning clothes that made me feel sharp and ready to take on the world. When I walked into the cafe, I spotted Ryan already seated, sipping on a latte and scrolling through his phone. He looked up as I approached, his expression shifting from surprise to that familiar smugness. "Jake, glad you could make it," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "Thanks for having me," I replied, forcing a smile as I settled into the chair across from him. We started with small talk, discussing our backgrounds and interests. I played my role well, asking questions about his new startup and appearing genuinely intrigued. Ryan, with his usual bravado, began to elaborate on his vision, clearly relishing the opportunity to impress me. I feigned admiration, nodding along while mentally taking notes on every detail he shared. As the conversation progressed, I subtly dropped hints about my own expertise in the field. I mentioned how I had worked on projects that involved securing funding and navigating the startup world. I wanted to make him feel at ease, to build trust so that when the time came, my actions would come as a surprise. But in the back of my mind, a sense of guilt crept in. I was manipulating this situation, and while I was motivated by revenge, I was also aware that I was playing with fire. Ryan had his flaws, but he was still a person with dreams and aspirations. I pushed those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the task at hand. After an hour of discussing the startup, I saw my opening. "You know, Ryan, I've heard some things floating around about the funding for your new project. There have been rumors about potential investors backing out," I said, watching his reaction closely. His expression shifted from confidence to concern. "What do you mean?" he asked, the edge of anxiety creeping into his voice. I leaned in, lowering my voice as if sharing a secret. "I've heard from some sources that they're not entirely convinced about the direction your project is taking. If I were you, I'd consider tightening up your pitch and addressing any lingering doubts." I could see the wheels turning in his mind as he processed my words. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of sympathy. Maybe I was going too far. But then I reminded myself of the pain he had caused me, the hurt that had driven me to this point. I needed him to panic to feel the weight of his decisions. "Thanks for the heads up, Jake," he finally replied, his voice strained. "I'll look into it." We wrapped up our meeting soon after, and as I walked away from the cafe, I felt a mix of triumph and unease. I had planted seeds of doubt in Ryan's mind, and while I felt a rush of satisfaction, I also realized I was treading a delicate line between justice and cruelty. That night I met up with Sarah, and as we shared dinner I could see the change in her. She seemed happier, more engaged, and while I wanted to share my day with her, I hesitated. Would revealing my plans for Ryan only stir up more turmoil? I decided to keep this part of my life to myself for now, focusing on our healing instead. But as I lay in bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was becoming someone I barely recognized. My thirst for revenge had taken root deep within me, and while I thought I was regaining control, I was also inching closer to losing sight of who I truly wanted to be. It was a dangerous game I was playing, and I knew I had to figure out how to navigate it without losing myself completely in the process. Let me know if you want to continue with the final part. The following weeks were a whirlwind of tension and anticipation. I had set the wheels in motion against Ryan, but each day I grappled with my moral compass. I had initially believed my actions were justified. After all, he had betrayed me in the worst way possible. But as I watched my life with Sarah slowly improve, I felt increasingly conflicted about the lengths I was willing to go for revenge. Sarah was thriving as we worked through our issues together. She was more present, attentive, and committed to making our marriage work. We laughed more, went on outings, and even enjoyed quiet evenings on the couch. Each day felt like a step in the right direction, but the shadow of my ongoing plan against Ryan loomed heavily over my conscience. One evening, after an intimate dinner, I found myself staring out the window, lost in thought. The city lights sparkled like stars, but all I felt was a deep sense of unease. I had spent so much time and energy focused on punishing Ryan that I had almost lost sight of what truly mattered: my marriage, my love for Sarah, and my own integrity. In that moment, I made a decision. I couldn't allow myself to be consumed by revenge any longer. I wouldn't let Ryan dictate my life or my happiness. I needed to confront him one last time, not to sabotage him further, but to put an end to this chapter of my life and reclaim my agency. I reached out to Ryan, requesting a meeting. To my surprise, he agreed, perhaps thinking I was still interested in collaborating or sharing more insider information. The night of the meeting, I walked into the cafe, feeling a mix of apprehension and resolve. When I saw Ryan, I could tell he was on edge. The tension was palpable, and for a moment we both sat in silence, sizing each other up. Jake, he finally broke the silence, a hint of irritation in his voice. What's this about? I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I'm not here to play games anymore, Ryan. I wanted to let you know that I'm done with the revenge. I don't want to sabotage you or your projects anymore. He raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback. Seriously, after everything I put you through? Yes, seriously. I've spent enough time and energy consumed by anger. It's exhausting and it's not who I want to be, I replied, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. I want to move forward, not just in my life but in my marriage. I can't do that while holding on to this resentment towards you. For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in Ryan's eyes. You're letting me off the hook just like that? He asked, incredulous. I'm not letting you off the hook for what you did. That will always be a part of our history, but I'm choosing not to let it define me anymore. I hope you can take this as a wake-up call too. You've hurt people and you need to take responsibility for your actions. His expression shifted, and for a moment I thought I saw a glimmer of recognition. Maybe you're right, I've made mistakes and I've acted like a jerk, but I guess I never thought anyone would actually call me out on it. I nodded, feeling a sense of closure wash over me. This isn't about being friends or forgiving each other. It's about acknowledging the past and moving forward. I just want to focus on my life now, and I think you should do the same. As we talked, I saw a change in him. The familiar smugness was replaced by a more subdued demeanor. We didn't end as friends, but I could see that my words had resonated with him. I hoped that maybe, just maybe, he would reflect on his behavior and strive to be better. After our conversation, I felt lighter. I had taken control of my narrative, and for the first time since all of this began, I felt a sense of peace. I returned home to Sarah, eager to share the news. As I walked through the door, I could see her face light up when she saw me. How did it go? She asked, her eyes filled with concern. I smiled, feeling a wave of relief. It's over. I've let it all go. I won't let Ryan control my life anymore. She hugged me tightly, and in that moment I felt a renewed sense of hope. Our journey wasn't over, but we were moving forward together, stronger than before. In the weeks that followed, as we focused on rebuilding our relationship, I realized that healing took time and effort. But with each passing day, we grew closer. We learned to communicate openly, to be vulnerable with each other, and to trust again. As I reflected on the chaos of the past months, I recognized that betrayal had come in many forms, not just from Sarah, but from my own actions as well. Revenge had consumed me, but through honesty and growth, I had found a way to reclaim my life without losing myself. If I could offer advice to anyone facing a similar situation, it would be this. Revenge may feel empowering, but it ultimately leads to a cycle of pain. Choose to rise above, focus on what truly matters, and seek healing and growth instead of revenge. In doing so, you'll find your true strength and be able to build a future that reflects the person you aspire to be. That's the lesson I learned through this tumultuous experience, and it's a lesson I now carry with me every day. And that concludes my story.